Do you know what it's like to grieve while someone calculates your father's net worth in real time? Because I do. The funeral wasn't even over, people still whispering prayers, the casket still resting in the front of the chapel, when Carl, my brother-in-law, raised his glass of cheap red wine at the reception and announced, "Well, looks like my wife's the lucky one. All the stocks and $3 million? That's ours now. Perks of marrying the oldest daughter." Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. He said it loud, like a toast, like it was a done deal. I was holding my mother's hand when he said it. I felt her fingers twitch, but she said nothing. My husband, Derek, quietly stepped between me and Carl. And I laughed. I didn't mean to. It just slipped out, like a reflex. But not a happy laugh. No, this was the kind of laugh that happens when you know something someone else doesn't. The kind of laugh that makes people turn around. Carl turned red. Derek tried to cover it. "Jess," he whispered. "Now's not the time." But I couldn't help myself. Because Carl had no idea that everything he thought he was about to own wasn't his. Not even close. And he definitely didn't know that the lawyer sitting 2 tables over had arranged a very different version of my father's legacy. You want to know what happened? You want to know why I laughed? Sit tight. Because this story doesn't go the way you think. And Carl? Carl was about to learn a lesson in humiliation that not even death could silence. Let me rewind a bit. My name's Jessica. I'm 32. I work in tech consulting. I live in San Diego with my husband Derek and, until recently, I was the least interesting member of my family. At least, that's how it always felt. My sister Angela. 2 years older, polished, always the center of attention, was the family star. Picture perfect. Debutante energy. She married Carl, the golden boy of his MBA class. They drive a Tesla, drink $14 smoothies, and wear matching tennis whites on vacation. Me? I've always been the quiet one. The low-maintenance daughter. The one who showed up to dinner in flats, not heels. The one Dad would forget to introduce in conversation. Or so I thought. My father, Robert, was a complicated man. A financial advisor turned venture capitalist. He built a portfolio that included tech stocks, real estate, and businesses I still don't fully understand. But what I do understand is that he valued control, structure, power. He wasn't warm. He wasn't the dad jokes kind of dad, but he respected competence. He noticed loyalty. And in his own silent way, he watched everything. That's why, when he got sick last year, pancreatic cancer, stage 4, he didn't tell Angela. Or Carl. Or even Mom. Not at first. He told me. "Jessica," he'd said, one night over lukewarm tea in his study, "I don't trust people who smile too much when money is involved." It was out of nowhere. And I wasn't sure if it was a dig at Carl or just his way of starting a conversation. "I'll need your help," he said. "With digital things." Digital things. That's what he called it. Passwords. Security keys. Transferring files. Checking encryption. It was all basic for me, but for Dad, this was sacred ground. And he trusted me with it. For the next 6 months, I helped him organize everything. His online accounts. Stock holdings. Private notes. Conversations with lawyers. Half of it I didn't even understand fully. He'd say things like, fail-safe protocol, and contingency air channel, and I'd nod like I knew what he meant. He didn't say thank you. He didn't hug me. But he'd leave me sticky notes like, corrected ledger. Good catch. Or, your instincts were better than mine. Again. They meant more than any birthday card he ever wrote. He died 3 weeks ago. And since then, it's been a whirlwind of suits, silences, and whispered expectations. Everyone assumed Angela would get everything. Not just because she was the oldest, but because she acted like the heir. She walked through the house with claim in her stride. She pointed at paintings and muttered things like, "This would go well in our foyer." Carl? He did worse. He smiled through the funeral like a man who'd already won. You ever seen someone pre-spend money they don't have? That was Carl. He told his friends at the wake, no less, that they'd be joining him in Maui next month. Once that wire hits, he said, we're doing 4 seasons all the way. I wasn't supposed to hear that. But I did. He also said this. You marry right, you win the lottery. Angela's dad? He was the lottery. That one stuck with me. The thing is, Carl didn't marry right. Not at all. But let's go back to the reception. We're in the family dining room, which has been converted into a makeshift memorial lounge. People are mingling with their grief. Angela is being hugged by people who don't really like her. Carl is holding court near the wine bar. And that's when he makes his announcement. All the stocks and $3 million in inheritance go to my wife, he says, loud enough for the caterers to hear. As it should be. The oldest daughter. Legacy and all that. People freeze. I look over at Mr. Brantley, our family's estate lawyer. He's got a bite of quiche halfway to his mouth, and when he hears Carl, he lowers his fork and raises an eyebrow at me. We both laugh. Carl whips his head around. What's funny, he says, blinking like someone turned on the lights too fast. I say nothing. Mr. Brantley says nothing. And then Carl adds, well, I mean, we all know how this works. I've had lunch with Robert. We've talked plans. He said Angela would carry the torch. I wish I could describe the look on Derek's face. That tight-lipped, don't poke the bear look husbands get when they know a storm's coming. Angela swoops in, resting a hand on Carl's arm. Let's not talk money today, she says. But it's too late. The words are out. The gauntlet is thrown. What no one knows is that, hours from now, in a wood-paneled office downtown, that illusion will crack. That's where the will is. That's where the truth lives. And that's where Carl's fantasy dies. The best part? My dad didn't just write a will. He wrote a performance. A show. And we're all about to take our places on the stage. But what comes next? That's where things start to get really interesting. Because the will? It was only the beginning. And the real inheritance? It wasn't just about money. It was about power. And secrets. And revenge. The kind that simmers in silence for years before being unleashed like a carefully timed explosion. Are you ready to see someone implode under the weight of their own arrogance? Because I've waited my whole life for this moment. And trust me, you don't want to miss what happened at that will reading. Have you ever watched someone go from smug to speechless in under 60 seconds? I have. His name is Carl. The setting? A polished mahogany office in downtown San Diego, where legacies are decided over crystal water glasses and leather-bound folders. The air smells like paper and power. It's the day after the funeral. Everyone's tired, but the real performance hasn't even started yet. Carl walks in like he owns the building. Angela's right behind him, sunglasses on indoors, morning chic, I guess. She gives me a tight smile like we're sharing a private joke. We're not. Derek's hand brushes mine. A quiet gesture. He's not a man of many words, but when he gives me that look, it means one thing. Stay ready. Vivian, my mom, is the last to sit. She looks like she aged a decade in the last week. She doesn't talk much these days, just clutches her purse like it holds more than tissues and mints. Mr. Brantley enters. You know those people who walk like they already know the outcome of everything? That's him. Tailored suit, silver cufflinks, eyes that miss nothing. He greets us all like a funeral director with a Harvard degree, then takes his place at the head of the table. Thank you for being here. As you all know, Robert's final will and testament is to be read today. There are no copies. There have been no leaks. Everything discussed will remain confidential unless legally challenged. Carl clears his throat, grinning like a game show contestant. I mean, we all kinda know how this goes, right? The house, the shares, the accounts, it's pretty obvious. Brantley pauses. A slow blink. No, Mr. Benson. It's not. Angela shifts in her chair. Her fingers tighten around Carl's arm. Brantley opens the folder. And it begins. To my beloved wife, Vivian. Carl nods. Here we go, he mutters. I leave our wedding band, the deed to the small house in Palm Desert, and the first painting I ever purchased. I hope it reminds you of our early years. A pause. That's it. No cash. No stocks. No property. Just sentiment. Vivian lets out a breath I don't think she meant to. She doesn't look angry. Just tired. Angela tilts her head. Dad must have left the real assets for the trust. Carl smiles, already gloating. Brantley continues. To my daughter, Angela, I leave my watch collection, the BMW 7 Series, and the Rothko print in my study. I trust she will appreciate their aesthetic value. Carl leans forward. And? Brantley looks down at the paper again. That's all. Silence. Complete silence. Angela's mouth opens, then closes. Wait. That can't be right. What about the portfolio? The equity holdings? Carl actually laughs. No offense, but you must have skipped a few pages, Brantley. I didn't, Brantley replies, calm as a still lake. Angela snaps. There must be a trust. Something separate. You're saying he left me a car and a painting? That's absurd. Brantley interlocks his fingers. That's what the will states. As executor, I'm obligated to honor it. Carl stands now, his chair scraping back. No. Nope. I had conversations with Robert. He said Angela was his heir. His primary line. He wouldn't just leave her, Art. Brantley reaches into the folder. There is, however, one personal letter addressed to you, Mr. Benson. Would you like me to read it aloud? Carl scoffs. Sure. Why not? Brantley clears his throat. Carl, your ambition is impressive. Your loyalty is non-existent. A family man does not eye the vault while the body is still warm. I leave you nothing. Not out of spite, but because legacy is earned, not married into. Enjoy the BMW. But keep your hands off the keys. I wish I could explain the look on Carl's face. Jaw clenched. Ears red. Eyes flickering between outrage and disbelief. Angela gasps. That's not legal. It's insulting. It's legally binding, Brantley replies, casually flipping the page. And now, the final section. You could hear a pin drop. I don't move. I don't blink. Brantley begins again. To my daughter, Jessica. Angela groans. I leave nothing in this will. Carl throws up his hands. Finally. Something that makes sense. Derek sits forward. However, Brantley adds, I leave her a key. A literal one. To a lockbox located at Legacy Private Trust in La Jolla. Contents to be disclosed upon her arrival. This is not part of the will. It was arranged separately, outside probate, 6 months ago. My heartbeat thuds in my ears. Carl's scoffing now. A lockbox? Please. Probably old journals and a fountain pen. Angela laughs, but it sounds forced. Brantley closes the folder. That concludes the will. That's it. No bank accounts. No portfolio breakdown. No mention of the millions Dad was known to hold in tech shares and business equity. But I know what that means. Because I was there. I helped him set it up. And Carl? He just realized that everything he planned for, bragged about, and counted on slipped right through his fingers. But here's the part no one in that room knew yet. That lockbox? It wasn't a decoy. It was the beginning of the real inheritance. And once I opened it, I'd uncover the reason my father orchestrated this like a finale. This wasn't just a will. It was a test. But what Carl did next? That was the first move in a war he couldn't win. And it started the moment he followed me out of that office. What kind of man follows you out of a lawyer's office like a spoiled kid denied a toy? Carl. That's who. We hadn't even made it to the elevator when I heard his voice behind me. So that's it, huh? He barked, footsteps echoing through the marble hall. You think this is funny? I didn't answer. I just kept walking. Derek matched my pace. Calm. Silent. But you could feel the tension radiating off him. Carl wasn't finished. He wrote me out of the will? Me? After everything I've done for this family. Derek finally turned. What exactly have you done for this family, Carl? Carl blinked. Opened his mouth. Closed it. Then turned his fury on me. This is your fault. You poisoned him against us. Got into his head with your tech tricks or whatever. You manipulated a dying man. I stopped walking. Turned. And looked him straight in the eyes. You did that all by yourself, Carl. He scoffed and threw up his hands like I was the unreasonable one. But I could see it beneath the rage, he was unraveling. Because Carl doesn't lose. At least, not in his own head. But what he didn't realize was that my father wasn't playing a game Carl could win. This wasn't Monopoly. This was chess. And the next move? It was already waiting in Brantley's hands. Back in the office, Angela was pacing like a caged animal. Her hair was pulled too tight, her hands fluttering over her phone like she was texting her lawyer, if she even had one. Vivian sat in stunned silence, her purse on her lap, her eyes downcast. Mr. Brantley hadn't moved. When Derek and I walked back in, Carl close behind, Brantley gave me a polite nod. "I believe," he said, "you'll all want to hear this." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope. Cream-colored. Thick. Heavy. This, he explained, was a posthumous request from Robert. Not part of the will, but he was insistent it be delivered upon completion of the reading. He looked directly at Angela and Carl. "It's addressed to you both." Angela swallowed. Carl stepped forward like he was expecting a check. Brantley handed it over. "Read it aloud, if you'd like." Angela hesitated. Carl snatched it from her hand, ripped it open, unfolded the letter. His eyes scanned the page. Then again. Then a third time. "Read it," I said. He didn't want to. I could tell. But pride wouldn't let him pretend it didn't matter. So he read. Out loud. "In-laws," he began, his voice tight, "are strange creatures. They're either additions to the family or intrusions." Carl paused, glanced at Brantley. Brantley simply nodded. He kept reading. "You've always seen my wealth as inevitable, as something you'd absorb through proximity. But money, real money, is a mirror. It reflects character. And in your case, Carl, it reflects entitlement." Angela gasped. "Your ambition was never the issue. I once admired it, until I saw it twisted into manipulation. Private conversations, whispered legal suggestions, even attempted pressure on Vivian when I was in the hospital." Carl's face drained of color. "I knew that part. I was there. He tried convincing my mom to convince Dad to start transferring accounts early, just to make things easier," he'd said. "Keep going," I thought. "Angela," Carl read, his voice cracking slightly. "You disappointed me. Not for wanting stability, but for choosing partnership with a man who sees relationships as leverage. You knew better. You just chose easier." Angela's mouth opened like she was about to cry. But she didn't. She froze. Carl flipped to the second page. "To the both of you. I didn't cut you out of cruelty. I cut you out to protect what's left of this family. Consider your chapter in my life closed." Silence. Heavy. Sharp. Complete. Carl folded the letter with trembling hands. Angela stood, grabbing her purse with a snap. "We're leaving," she said, eyes red but dry. "No," Carl spat. "We're contesting this. I don't care if he wrote me a novel in blood. This isn't over." Brantley raised a brow. "You're welcome to try. But I'd advise you read the rest of the documents carefully. Your father-in-law had a very thorough legal team." Carl sneered. "Yeah? So, what did he leave her?" He jabbed a finger at me. "What did little Miss Secondborn get that's so damn special?" I met his gaze. "A key." "To what?" "A storage unit." Derek spoke for me. "To everything." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept playing the letter over in my head. Carl's voice reading it. Angela's frozen face. The look in my mom's eyes as she quietly folded a napkin in her lap during the whole thing. But mostly, I kept thinking about the why. Why a letter? Why not just cut them off in silence? My father didn't waste words. He didn't believe in catharsis. So for him to write that, it meant something. He wanted them to know. Not just that they'd lost, but why. It wasn't just about punishment. It was about control. Which meant he wasn't finished. At 2:17 a.m. I pulled out the envelope Brantley had handed me earlier. My key. It was small. Black. Plastic-coated. Numbered. Legacy Private Trust, La Jolla. I held it in my hand for a long time before sliding it back into my purse. Carl thought the story ended with the will. He thought that letter was the knockout punch. But Dad? He was just getting started. And whatever was inside that lockbox. It wasn't just meant for me. It was meant against them. But when I opened that vault the next morning, and found what he'd hidden? That's when I realized how deep this went. He'd built a second empire. And no one, not Carl, not Angela, not even Mom, had any idea it existed. What came next would unravel every lie they thought they could keep buried. What would you do if you opened a lockbox and found your entire life rewritten inside? Because that's what happened to me. I arrived at Legacy Private Trust in La Jolla just after 9 a.m., the morning sun glinting off the glass facade like the place had something to prove. The receptionist greeted me like I was royalty. No waiting. No questions. She already had my name. Mr. Brantley called ahead, she said, leading me to a private room with a frosted glass door and soundproof walls. Box 308 is ready for you. Box 308. It sounded so impersonal. But inside was everything my father never said out loud. They handed me a small black keycard and a tablet to sign. I was shaking. Not because I was scared. Because I knew deep in my chest this was bigger than a lockbox. This was legacy. And it wasn't meant to be shared. You ever open a box and realize it holds more truth than your entire childhood? The moment I opened box 308, I understood why my father left it out of the will. Because this wasn't something you leave behind casually. This was precision. Inside the brushed steel box, there were 4 items. A thick black binder labeled Holdings JS. A sealed envelope marked Private for Jessica only. A USB drive in a hard plastic case. A single brass key with a tag that read Vault 6B, Private Access. My fingers hovered over the binder first. It wasn't just documents. It was a damn empire. Property deeds, commercial and residential. Stock portfolios from early investments in at least 3 startups I knew had gone public in the last 5 years. One of them? A biotech firm valued at $600 million. There were certificates, password printouts, transaction histories with my name listed as the beneficiary. Not Angela. Not Vivian. Me. 6 LLCs. 2 offshore accounts. 1 private charitable trust, named after my grandfather. Estimated combined value? Just over $10.4 million. And all of it had been legally transferred into holding accounts under my name more than 6 months ago. 6 months ago. Meaning, while Dad was alive, while Carl was still making sly comments at Sunday dinners, while Angela was measuring curtains for the estate, my father was quietly building a financial fortress with me as the gatekeeper. I wasn't even crying. I just sat there, stunned, reading through the documents like they were written in another language. And in a way, they were. Because I'd spent my whole life believing I was the backup daughter. The quiet one. The runner-up. And here I was, holding a legacy that could buy our entire family tree 10 times over. And it wasn't an accident. It was surgical. He didn't just leave me money. He hid it. With intention. With strategy. With trust. The USB drive came next. When I plugged it into the secure terminal in the trust's private room, it opened a single folder. Inside, dozens of video files, voice memos, and spreadsheets. Most of them were financial, but there were a few labeled with initials. One folder, A and C, interference. My pulse spiked. I clicked it. Inside were saved email threads between Angela and Carl, some from as far back as 2 years ago, discussing Dad's health, his assets, and how to simplify the estate transfer while preserving appearances. I scrolled, jaw clenched. There were drafts of pre-written statements for Vivian to say if Dad became incapacitated. Talking points. Legal pressure tactics. Even a blank DNR form. My father knew. He'd been tracking them. Documenting everything. Silently. Systematically. And all of it was now mine. I opened the envelope last. It was written in his handwriting. Clean, sharp strokes. The same hand that used to write notes in the margins of my report cards. Jessica. If you're reading this, it means the noise has finally cleared. I built this quietly, not to hide it from the world, but to protect it from the wrong ones. They were watching the front door. I needed someone watching the back. And you? You were the only one who never asked me for anything. That's why this is yours. Not because you're my daughter. Because you earned it. Whatever you do next, don't explain. Don't apologize. Just act. They'll try to claw it back. Let them try. But remember, loyalty speaks louder than blood. And silence? Silence is a weapon. Dad. I sat there for a long time. Just breathing. Just absorbing it. This man, this cold, structured, calculating man, had orchestrated the ultimate reversal. While everyone else was watching the house, the car, the stocks on paper. He gave me the real fortune. Not just the money. The power. The leverage. And he left it in a box with my name on it, waiting for the day I'd be ready. But the part that really stuck with me? He didn't ask me to forgive them. He didn't say to share it. He said to act. And now? Now I had everything I needed to make sure Carl and Angela understood exactly what that meant. But first, I had to figure out what that brass key opened. Because it wasn't labeled. And something told me. It was the next phase of the game. How do you know when a trap has already been set? Simple. You're already standing in it. And by the time Carl realized what was happening, the floor had already disappeared beneath him. The brass key burned in my pocket all day. I couldn't stop touching it, turning it over, trying to guess what it unlocked. It was old-fashioned, solid, heavy, and labeled only with a number, Vault 6B. There was no address. No company name. Just that tag. But my father was nothing if not deliberate. He'd never leave something that cryptic unless he wanted me to look for it and find it on purpose. So I made some calls. Quiet ones. Pulled a few text strings. Searched a few registry databases. And by that evening, I was standing in front of an unmarked private storage facility just south of the city. No branding. No sign. Just a keypad, a camera, and a steel gate. The kind of place where people keep secrets they don't want listed on any inventory. The receptionist didn't even blink when I gave her the tag number. Vault 6B? Right this way. No ID check. No signature. My name was already in the system. Of course it was. This wasn't just a vault. It was a time capsule. And what was inside was pure ammunition. The vault door clicked open with a mechanical sigh. Inside, rows of bankers' boxes stacked neatly along the back wall. Each one labeled with initials, dates, and cryptic codes. But the front row had a bright red sticker. For review, ANC interference /2022 to 2023. I opened the first box with shaking hands. Inside, printouts of emails, signed documents, transcripts, and a single thumb drive. I plugged it into my laptop right there, sitting on the cold concrete floor. The files were stunning. My father had built an entire paper trail on purpose. A mirror image of his estate planning, designed to look suspicious. Fake transfer documents, draft wills, fabricated power of attorney forms. All dated, watermarked, and left just vulnerable enough to be discovered if someone went looking. It was bait. And Carl? Carl bit down hard. One file in particular caught my breath. It was a screen recording. Footage from a hidden camera in my father's home office. The angle showed Carl standing near Dad's desk, flipping through folders when he thought no one was watching. I could hear Angela's voice off screen saying, "Just scan it and put it back. He won't know." Carl replied, "He won't care. He's practically out the door already." And then he pulled out his phone. Scanned a will. The fake will. The one Dad planted on purpose. You getting it now? Carl had no idea he'd walked right into a maze. And the best part? It wasn't even illegal. Because my father hadn't filed those documents. He hadn't submitted anything false. He left them laying around, knowing full well Carl would snoop. He wanted him to. Because once Carl tried to use them, boom. Fraud. Intent. Malicious interference. Game over. When I got back home that night, Derek was waiting in the kitchen. He had the TV on mute, but a news ticker was scrolling across the bottom. Local businessman Robert St. James passes, estate dispute rumors swirl. Guess who's talking to reporters, Derek said, tossing me his phone. Carl. Of course. There he was on screen, standing outside some law office, giving a press statement like he was some kind of wounded prince. We were blindsided, he was saying. There's evidence of undue influence. The second daughter had access to his digital files. It's clear to us that the will was manipulated in her favor. He even threw in a tear for good measure. Angela stood behind him, stiff as a statue. He's trying to get ahead of it, Derek said. Control the narrative. I opened my laptop and started uploading the files I found. Good, I said. Let him dig deeper. Derek raised an eyebrow. You want him to keep going? He's already buried himself, I said. Now I just need the court to see the shovel. The next day, I sent an anonymous tip to a legal news blog. Not the big guys, just small enough to run it without vetting too hard. Attached? A few documents from the interference folder. A redacted transcript of the office footage. And one beautiful headline suggestion. Did a power couple try to hijack a dying man's will? It went live in 2 hours. Angela called me within 3. Jess, she said, voice tight, what are you doing? I played dumb. What do you mean? Someone's leaking fake documents. You need to stop this. It's going to destroy everything. Fake, I said, casually stirring my tea. Carl didn't think they were fake when he tried to present them to Brantley, did he? Silence. Then, he thought your father changed his mind. That maybe. Don't, I said. Don't twist this. You scanned a will you knew wasn't filed. You took advantage of a dying man. And you still thought you were owed something. Dad loved me. I think he did. I think that's why he made sure you didn't have access to anything real. Angela's voice broke for a second. You don't understand what you've started. But I did. I understood exactly what I'd started. And I wasn't done. Because Carl had just filed a formal petition to contest the will. And that meant everything was about to become public record. And when it did, that USB drive, that fake paper trail, that camera footage, all of it was going straight to the judge. But the real knockout punch was something I hadn't even seen yet. Because when I opened that last folder on the drive, I found a video. My father, talking directly to the camera. And what he said changed everything. How far would you go to claw back a fortune that was never yours? If you're Carl, the answer is simple. All the way into the courtroom, and straight off a cliff. The day after the blog post exploded, Carl filed an official petition in probate court to contest the will. Allegations of undue influence, mental incompetence, and, you guessed it, fraud. He claimed I digitally manipulated our father's final wishes. He called me a tech-savvy opportunist. That one made me laugh. Not because it wasn't accurate, but because he said it out loud on camera while holding a press conference outside the courthouse, acting like he was some kind of financial freedom fighter. You should have seen it. Dark suit. Slicked back hair. A carefully folded handkerchief in his blazer pocket, like he thought the jury was already watching. Angela stood beside him again. But this time, she didn't speak. She didn't smile either. And I couldn't tell if that was guilt or calculation. Carl spoke like he was rallying a crowd. We believe Jessica St. James exploited her father's declining condition to rewrite his legacy. We have documentation suggesting that his digital estate was altered and restructured during a time when he was vulnerable. I watched the footage from my kitchen table. Derek leaned on the counter, arms folded. He keeps saying the word documentation, Derek said. You think he even knows what he's scanned? Nope, I replied. But I bet he's about to learn. Because the thing about filing a lawsuit? It opens the door to discovery. And discovery opens the door to evidence. And evidence? Well, I had plenty of that. I didn't want to go public. But Carl didn't leave me a choice. Once he filed, the court date was set. Statements would be reviewed. Depositions scheduled. And the minute a judge saw any indication of bad faith, everything Carl was counting on, his reputation, his case, his entire credibility, would implode. But I wasn't just planning to defend myself. I was going to expose everything. That same night, I emailed Mr. Brantley. Attached were 3 key pieces. The office camera footage of Carl scanning the fake will. The email threads where he and Angela discussed manipulating Mom. A timestamped audio clip, Dad talking to me during our digital sessions, saying, none of them are to touch this. Not a single one. You're the only one I trust with this. Brantley replied in under 5 minutes. Prepare to win. But that wasn't the end. Because Carl, in true Carl fashion, didn't stop at legal fire. He went for public fire. 2 days later, my name was trending on local Twitter. Not because of me. Because of Carl's friends. A few anonymous sources, obviously his inner circle, started leaking claims about me to gossip blogs. That I manipulated our father's medications. That I isolated him from the family. That I encouraged him to go off-grid with his finances. One even claimed I had a secret boyfriend who worked at a crypto exchange. Derek actually laughed at that one. Should I be worried? He asked. You're the one who taught Dad how to use two-factor authentication, I said. They should be worried about you. The lies didn't bother me. Not really. Because I knew what was coming. They were swinging wild, hoping something would stick. But Dad? Dad had recorded a final message. A video. That video? Was everything. And I hadn't even watched it yet. The night before our preliminary hearing, I sat in my office, door closed, laptop open. Derek was asleep upstairs. The city was quiet. Just me and the screen. I clicked play. The video opened with static. Then a click. Then my father. No music. No edits. No filters. Just him, sitting in his office chair, wearing one of his dark gray sweaters, staring into the lens. Jessica, he said. If you're seeing this, it means they did exactly what I thought they would. He paused. I knew Carl would contest the will. I knew Angela would stand behind him. And I knew the public wouldn't understand what I built unless I laid it out piece by piece. He gestured off screen. There are documents. Files. Footage. But more than that, there's intent. This wasn't about money. It never was. It was about trust. Loyalty. Who shows up when no one's watching? And who starts circling when they smell blood in the water? He leaned forward, elbows on knees. You showed up. Quietly. Without asking for anything. You organized my files. You protected my assets. You told no one. That's why this is yours. That's why they get nothing. He held up a piece of paper. It was the fake will. I planted this. I left it where I knew Carl would find it. And he did. Like clockwork. He smiled, just a little. Let them try. Let them rage. Let them scream that it's unfair. Then his voice dropped. But you don't apologize. Don't explain. Just show them. Show the court. Show the world. What they are. The screen faded to black. That was it. 6 minutes. But it said more than anything I could ever testify under oath. It wasn't just evidence. It was a reckoning. The next morning, I walked into that courtroom with my head high. Carl was already seated, flipping through a manila folder like he had arguments to spare. Angela sat beside him, her hands in her lap. She didn't look at me. Brantley gave me a nod as I took my seat. And the judge? Well, he wasted no time. Let's begin, he said, voice sharp. Counsel for the estate. Do you have a response to Mr. Benson's petition? Brantley stood. Yes, Your Honor. But before I begin, I'd like to play a short video. Carl turned. Confused. Angela froze. And I just smiled. Because what they were about to see was my father speaking from beyond the grave, destroying their case in 6 brutal minutes. But what none of us knew was that the fallout wouldn't end there. Because after the video played, someone else stood up. Someone I never expected. Someone with a secret of their own. Have you ever watched a courtroom go dead silent? Not just quiet, paralyzed. Because that's what happened the moment my father's video ended. 6 minutes. That's all it took for a dead man to do what none of us could. Speak the truth so clearly, so coldly, that even the walls couldn't look away. Carl looked like he'd swallowed a nail. Face pale. Jaw locked. Hands gripping the edge of the defense table so tightly his knuckles went white. Angela didn't even move. Not once. She stared straight ahead, blinking rapidly, like if she didn't acknowledge what she'd just heard, maybe it wouldn't be real. The judge sat still for a moment, then leaned back in his chair. I assume this, he said slowly, is the deceased. Mr. Brantley nodded. Robert St. James. Filmed and time-stamped 8 months before his death. The metadata is available. Verified by independent digital forensics. The judge turned to Carl. Mr. Benson, care to respond? Carl stood, shaky but defiant. That video, that could have been doctored. Who's to say she didn't edit it? The judge raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting your sister-in-law deep-faked her father to disinherit you? I'm suggesting she had motive, Carl snapped. She had access. She isolated him from the family. Brantley cut in. With all due respect, Your Honor, the court has already received documentation of Carl Benson accessing and scanning an unfiled draft will, attempting to present it as valid estate documentation. As you saw in the video, that will was deliberately planted by the decedent as a test. The trap worked. The evidence is clear. Carl opened his mouth again. But then, something unexpected happened. Vivian stood. My mother. She rose slowly from the spectator bench, clutching her purse with both hands like a shield. The courtroom turned. Even the judge tilted his head slightly. Mrs. St. James, he said. Do you have something to add? She nodded. I do. She walked to the front of the room. She didn't look at Carl. Didn't look at Angela. She looked at me. Then she turned to the judge. I've stayed quiet because I thought that's what a wife was supposed to do. I thought if I just kept my head down, everything would fall into place the way Robert wanted. But now? I think he knew I'd have to speak eventually. She reached into her purse and pulled out a letter. Folded, yellowing. Familiar. I recognized the handwriting. Dad's. She handed it to the judge. This came to the house a few days after Robert died. It was addressed to me, personally. I never told anyone. Until today. The judge unfolded the letter, skimmed it silently. Then he nodded to Brantley. Please enter this into evidence. Brantley took it carefully, glanced at me, then looked back at the judge. May I read it aloud? You may. He cleared his throat. To Vivian. I know you'll be scared. Angry. Confused. But I also know you. I know you see more than you say. I know you kept things quiet even when you knew they were wrong. But silence has a cost. If you're holding this, then the storm has started. And it's time you stop protecting people who never protected you. Angela is not the daughter you think she is. Carl is not the man he pretends to be. They tried to control you. Shape you into a puppet for their plans. You told me once, maybe if I don't resist, they'll stop pushing. They won't. I left Jessica the legacy, not just because she earned it, but because I knew she would protect you too. Stand with her. This is your freedom, too. Love. Robert. The room was silent again. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This was a breaking point kind of silence. Angela stood now. Her face was flushed. Her voice cracked. Mom, why would you wait until now? Vivian finally looked at her. For years I watched you treat Jessica like she didn't exist. And I let it happen. But your father saw her. And now, so do I. Angela's mouth opened. But no words came out. She turned to Carl. He didn't look at her. Didn't touch her. Didn't move. Because Carl finally knew it was over. The judge tapped his pen twice on the desk. This hearing will reconvene tomorrow for final review. Based on current evidence, unless something substantial changes, this court intends to uphold the existing will and reject the petition. He stood. We're adjourned. Outside the courtroom, the air was thick with press and heat and tension. Cameras snapped. Reporters shouted. But I didn't stop. Not until I reached the car with Derek. We sat there in silence for a minute before he said it. That was a lot. I nodded. I didn't know Mom had that letter. She didn't know what to do with it until now. And your dad, he said quietly, really planned everything. He did. Every step. Every decoy. Every backup plan. But there was still one more piece left. That brass key. Vault 6B had only been part of it. Because there, in my inbox when I got home, was an alert. From Legacy Private Trust. Subject line. New authorized access. Final deposit notification. I clicked it. Inside, a message. A secondary deposit has been triggered by court activation of the final will. Vault 6C is now open. Same location. Key required. One vault left. One final message. And what I found in that vault. Changed the game one last time. Because my father wasn't just protecting me. He was protecting something bigger. And the truth inside Vault 6C was never meant for me alone. Some truths aren't hidden. They're just forgotten or ignored. Maybe because they're too painful. Maybe because deep down, you know once you open that door, there's no going back. That's what Vault 6C felt like. A door I wasn't sure I wanted to open. But I did. Because my father made sure I had to. The same steel building. The same cold security. The same frosted glass conference room. But this time, the receptionist didn't even need a keycard. She smiled politely and said, "He told us you'd come back." I wasn't sure whether to feel honored or haunted. The vault was smaller than 6B. Fewer boxes. Just one, in fact. A long, flat, dark gray box. No sticker. No label. No lock. Inside? A leather-bound journal. A letter. And a single photograph. I opened the journal first. Every page was in his handwriting. Organized. Precise. But messier than usual. Less structured. As if he wrote it late at night, when no one was watching. Or maybe when he couldn't sleep. The entries began a year before he died. They weren't about money. They were about us. About Angela. About Carl. About me. About my mother. About regrets. March 14th, 2022. Angela came over today. Told me she was looking at houses near Palm Springs. Said they'd need something fitting when the estate was eventually theirs. Didn't ask how I was feeling. Didn't ask about the results. I smiled. Said nothing. Later, I found her in my office, opening my drawer. She didn't even flinch. April 8th, 2022. Jessica updated the encryption on my online files today. Said I needed a better firewall. She didn't explain why. She just did it. She never asks for anything. She doesn't even expect me to say thank you. She just works. Quietly. Like I used to. I've underestimated her for too long. The pages went on. Little things. Moments. Carl asking for early access to investment documents for planning purposes. Angela pressing to streamline the process in case of a sudden decline. My mother, caught in the middle, trying to stay small to avoid the storm. And through it all, he was writing, watching, tracking. There were sticky notes tucked between pages. One said, "Silence doesn't mean weakness. It means you're listening." Another, scribbled in the margin. "I built this family with numbers. I should have built it with presence." By the end of the journal, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt seen. But I also felt sad. Because this was the version of my father I never got to know in life. Not until he was gone. And there was one more thing. The letter. Tucked inside the back of the journal. It was shorter. Neater. Like it had been rewritten several times before he sealed it. It was addressed to me. Not Jessica. Not daughter. Just you. You. This wasn't about a fight for money. That's just what they turned it into. This was always about clarity. You deserve to know the truth. About them. About me. About how legacy works. It's not what you leave in a bank account. It's what you leave behind when people stop pretending. That's what I'm leaving you. The truth. Do with it what you will. And one last thing, look behind the painting in the den. The one you never liked. You were right. It's ugly. Love. Dad. I drove straight to the house. I don't know why. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe curiosity. Maybe because I was still chasing some piece of him that I hadn't gotten yet. The den was dark. Dusty. Quiet. That painting? Still there. A giant, abstract mess of reds and browns and whatever emotions people pretend to understand when art costs more than rent. I lifted it off the wall. Behind it? A hidden panel. Inside the panel? A small metal box. Unlocked. I opened it. And inside, a photo. A printed one. Of me and my father. I didn't even remember it being taken. We were standing in his office. I was laughing. He was actually smiling. One hand on my shoulder. The other pointing at a screen. Something on the screen had made me laugh. On the back, in black ink. The moment I knew. You were the one who'd protect it all. That was it. No money. No code. Just a photo. A truth. And maybe that's what legacy really is. Not the vaults. Not the millions. Not the letters or the court cases or the traps or even the secrets. It's the moment someone sees you. Really sees you. And chooses you. Even if they never say it out loud while they're alive. Especially then. I left the photo in the box. Closed the panel. And walked back out of that house for the last time. Because the story wasn't about the house anymore. Or the will. Or even Carl. It was about clarity. And now? I had it. But when I stepped outside, a car was parked across the street. Carl. Watching. Waiting. And when he rolled the window down, he didn't look smug. He looked desperate. Because even now, after the court, after the video, after the collapse, he still wasn't done. He had one more card to play. One more secret. And what he told me next, I never saw coming. What does a man do when he loses everything? Simple. He bargains with ghosts. Carl's car window rolled down slowly, like he was trying to make the moment dramatic. But there was no smugness this time. No rehearsed arrogance. No performative rage. He looked hollow. Hair unkempt. Eyes sunken. Tie loose, like he'd forgotten to finish getting dressed. I didn't come here to fight, he said. I raised an eyebrow. You're sitting outside the estate like a stalker, Carl. I came to talk. About what? The millions you lost? The wife you dragged into a legal nightmare? Or the fact that you turned my father's death into a PR campaign? He sighed. It wasn't supposed to go like this. No, I said. It wasn't. You weren't supposed to touch anything. But you did. He rubbed his face with both hands, then leaned over the console. I want to make a deal. I actually laughed. You think I'm still playing your game? No, he said quickly. Not with you. With what I have. What could you possibly have, Carl? And that's when he dropped it. I have another copy of the journal. My heart stopped for half a second. What? Your dad's journal. I made a copy. Angela found it in the safe once, months ago. I scanned it. Thought it might come in handy. I clenched my fists. Are you blackmailing me? No, he said. I'm offering you a way to end this. Quietly. Clean. No press. No legacy war. You keep the assets. I walk away with something. I stared at him, stunned. Why no? Why not weeks ago? Because I thought I could win, he said flatly. And I thought Angela was smarter than she is. That caught my attention. I leaned against the gate, arms folded. What do you mean? Carl hesitated. Looked around. Then dropped his voice. She's leaving me. I blinked. You're lying. I wish I was. The moment she realized there wasn't a payout, she packed her things. Said I was the reason her father left her nothing. I wanted to feel sorry for him. But I didn't. I just felt done. He kept going. She's convinced you manipulated everything. That your dad wanted to punish her. I shook my head. He didn't want to punish her. He wanted to protect me. And Mom. From you both. Carl nodded. I get that now. I waited a beat. Then, so what are you offering? He looked up, defeated. You destroy the court footage. The video. The camera proof. Make it disappear. I'll destroy the journal copy. You keep everything. I move on. I stared at him, trying to decide if I was speaking to the real Carl for the first time, or just a desperate man in the final act of a failed performance. Then I said, no. He blinked. What? No deal. No negotiation. No mercy. You gambled with someone else's death. You tried to control a grieving family. You turned your wife into a weapon and called it strategy. He opened his mouth. I cut him off. You don't get a quiet exit, Carl. You get consequences. Then I turned and walked away. Left him sitting in that car with nothing but the ghost of an empire he never actually owned. But as I reached my car door, I stopped. Because he called out one more thing. Something I didn't expect. Something true. You think this ends with me? He shouted. It doesn't. Your dad had enemies, Jess. Real ones. This wasn't just about inheritance. You're holding something that other people want. You think I'm the villain. He laughed, bitter and broken. I was the warning shot. Then he slammed his car door and peeled away, leaving behind more questions than answers. And one terrifying thought. What if he was right? What if there was more to the story than even Dad had told me? What if the inheritance wasn't the prize? What if it was the bait? Carl's last words echoed in my head all night. You think I'm the villain? I was the warning shot. I didn't sleep. Not really. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying everything: Dad's journal, the vaults, the traps, the silence he weaponized so well. He was careful. Paranoid, even. Men like that don't plan for just one threat. They plan for layers. By morning, I knew exactly where to look. Not the vaults. Not the trusts. Not the money. The shadow. I went back to the journal. Not to read it. To study it. Dad had a habit when he wanted to hide something in plain sight. He'd repeat a phrase. Over and over. Same wording. Same punctuation. I flipped through the pages again. And there it was. 3 times. Different months. Same line. Numbers don't lie. People do. Always check the margins. Margins. I pulled the journal closer. And there they were. Tiny marks. Pencil, not pen. Almost invisible. Symbols I'd ignored the first time because they didn't look like words. But they weren't random. They were coordinates. Page numbers. Dates. Account codes. A ledger. Not the official one. A shadow ledger. I cross-referenced the markings with the USB files from Vault 6B. It took hours. Then days. I barely ate. Barely spoke. Derek noticed. You're chasing something, he said one night, leaning in the doorway. What is it? I don't know yet, I said honestly. But Dad wanted me to find it. That much is clear. By the 3rd night, I found it. A hidden folder nested so deep in the drive's directory structure it looked like system junk. Title, L77. Inside? Transactions. Not illegal. Not exactly. But quiet. Shell companies feeding into shell companies. Profits rerouted, then donated, then reinvested. Always clean. Always legal. Always invisible. Until you knew how to look. One name appeared again and again as a secondary beneficiary. Not Carl. Not Angela. A man I didn't recognize. Evan Mercer. I froze. I knew that name. Everyone in finance did. Mercer Capital Group. Private equity. Aggressive acquisitions. Ruthless reputation. Dad had warned me about him once. He buys companies like people buy disposable razors, Dad had said. One use. Then trash. Why was his name anywhere near my father's money? I dug deeper. And that's when I found the note. A scanned page. Handwritten. If Mercer comes sniffing, it means I'm gone. He won't care about the will. He'll care about leverage. Leverage. The ledger wasn't about wealth. It was about control. Dad had been siphoning influence. Quietly investing in companies Mercer relied on. Positioning himself where he could pull strings without being seen. A counterweight. A balance. And now? That balance had transferred to me. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer. Then it buzzed again. Same number. I answered. Jessica St. James, a calm voice said. Male. Polished. Confident. I'm Evan Mercer. My chest tightened. Your father and I had unfinished business, he continued. And now, it seems, you do too. I said nothing. Silence stretched. I won't waste your time, Mercer said. I know you've accessed the secondary ledger. I also know you're smart enough to understand what it represents. What do you want? I asked. A pause. An introduction, he said. A conversation. Your father played defense. I'd like to see if you're willing to play offense. I laughed once. Sharp. Short. You threaten my family. No, he replied smoothly. I observed your father's moves. Carl was irrelevant. A distraction. Useful, but disposable. That word again. Disposable. I'm not my father, I said. I know, Mercer replied. That's why I'm calling you. The line went dead. I stood there for a long time, phone still in my hand. Dad hadn't just left me money. He'd left me a seat at a table I never asked to sit at. And now someone was pulling out a chair. Whether I liked it or not. I looked at the journal again. At the margins. At the final note he'd written near the back. If you find this, it means you're stronger than I was. Decide carefully. The truth protects, but it also attracts. Carl had been wrong about many things. But on one point, he was right. This wasn't over. Not even close. Have you ever reached the end of a story and realized it wasn't the end at all? That it was just the door you had to walk through before stepping into a much darker, stranger room? Because that's what this was. My father's death didn't end anything. It started everything. The court formally dismissed Carl's petition 2 weeks later. In his ruling, the judge called it a textbook example of malicious contestation and even hinted at criminal inquiry if Carl attempted to resurface the forged documents again. Carl didn't show up in court that day. Angela did. She wore black. Not for mourning, I think, just to remind the room that she was still in it. She didn't look at me. Didn't say a word. But I knew that silence now. I knew what it meant. It meant this wasn't just a loss for her. It was a death sentence. Not of her life, but of her version of life. The one where she was the center. The one where appearances meant security. The one where inheritance was a crown and Dad was just the man holding it. That world was gone. And she couldn't accept it. After the ruling, I met with Mr. Brantley one last time in his office. He poured me a glass of something amber and sharp and said, "You understand what you're sitting on now, don't you?" "I'm starting to," I said. "Your father didn't just protect his estate. He created a map of power. Every name in those shadow ledgers, every shell company, every holding, that's a web. A silent one. And you're now at the center." I stared at the glass in my hand. "And Mercer?" Brantley frowned. "Mercer is a shark in a penthouse. He doesn't want money. He wants to own narratives, influence, decisions, legislation." He leaned forward. "Your father wasn't just resisting him. He was outmaneuvering him. And now he wants to make a deal with me." "Of course he does," Brantley said. "He respects leverage. And you, Jessica? You're holding a loaded vault of it." The night after the court win, I went back to my father's study. Not to clean. Not to say goodbye. But to decide. There was one more file on the USB drive I hadn't opened yet. Labeled only Endgame. It was encrypted. He'd left the password in the journal margins, Valkyrie 122. When I typed it in, the screen blinked once. Then a video started playing. It wasn't like the others. No direct-to-camera speech. No desk. No suit. Just a recording of his screen. Excel spreadsheets. Corporate filings. Meeting logs. Donations. Names. Lots of names. Politicians. Executives. Quiet billionaires who never show up on magazine covers. And at the center of it all? Evan Mercer. Connected by thin, invisible strings to everyone who thought they were free. My father's voice came in like a whisper. "You always thought I was paranoid." I wasn't. I was awake. Mercer doesn't need to break laws. He rewrites them. Quietly. Efficiently. And for a while, I let it happen. I was even part of it. Pause. But then I watched it happen to someone else. I won't say who. It doesn't matter. What matters is I stepped away. And the second I did, I became a liability. That's why I built this system. That's why I moved in silence. Because power is only power when no one knows where it lives. Another pause. And now it lives with you. The screen went dark. Just one final line of text. You can destroy it. You can control it. But you can't ignore it. Choose. I stared at the monitor long after the video ended. Because there it was. The true inheritance. Not money. Not land. Not stocks. Power. Real power. Influence stitched into the bones of the world. My father had held it. Now I did. And Mercer? He knew it. The next morning, I received a package. No return address. Inside? A black business card. Embossed in gold. Evan Mercer. MCG Private Zurich. On the back, handwritten. A meeting. When you're ready. I held it for a long time. Then I set it on fire. Let it curl into ash in a metal tray. Derek walked in, caught the last of it burning. You okay? He asked. No, I said. But I will be. What was that? An invitation. He nodded. Didn't ask more. Because he knew. The story wasn't about Carl anymore. Or Angela. Or even my father. It was about me. About what I was going to do next. I transferred ownership of the estate into a silent foundation. Reallocated the corporate assets through a third-party trustee. I kept the portfolio, but I moved the pieces. No one would ever see the web again. Because power, used correctly, is never seen. Only felt. I don't speak to Angela. Not because I hate her, but because there's nothing left to say. Carl moved out of state. Rumor has it he's consulting for low-tier startups now, hoping someone buys his strategic vision. No one will. Mom's doing better. She smiles more. Talks more. Tells stories about my father that I've never heard before. Funny ones. Flawed ones. Real ones. I like those. And me? I still work in tech. Still answer emails. Still drink bad coffee at 2 a.m. But behind it all, I watch the markets. I read the filings. I track the names. Because somewhere out there, Evan Mercer is still building his empire. And somewhere inside mine is the blueprint to stop him. I didn't ask for this war. But my father left me the sword. And sometimes, the quietest legacy is the one sharp enough to cut back. Thanks for listening. Tell me something. If you were left the keys to a hidden empire, would you burn it? Or would you learn how to rule it? Because me? I'm still deciding. But one thing's for sure. I'm not my father's daughter for nothing.